Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second part of a three-part webinar series hosted by the Exit Planning Institute, by Sunbelt Business Advisors, and by Northwestern Mutual. My name is KG, and I'm an associate at Sunbelt Business Advisors in Minneapolis. We're the world's largest seller of companies. In the first part, we discussed the actions a business owner needs to take before considering the sale of the company. In this section, we will be talking about the sale process itself, what drives it. And next week, the wealth advisors from Northwestern Mutual will be discussing ways to conserve and or grow the net proceeds that you receive from the sale of your company. The second page is we've designed an agenda for you to be as interesting as possible. But we have to go through a few technical terms, and then we'll like to be storytellers, so that's what we'll try to attempt to do today. We're going to try and tell you a story. So a few bullet points. What will you do after you exit your business? Price, terms, taxes. It's all about what you net. None of those things really matter. They only matter in its summary form. What are the value drivers of your company? Why do similar companies in the same industry sell for much more different prices? How the valuation works? What's a purchase price? What's risk associated with it, and how they work together? The process itself of selling a company, and then we've prepared the takeaway from you. If you'd like, you can receive a no-cost, no-obligation price opinion after attending this webinar. Usually it's a $5,000 value, but if you stick around, you can profit. You can take opportunity of that. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Chris Jones, and Chris Jones is the managing partner in our Minneapolis office. Again, we're the largest office in the Sunbelt network system, and the Sunbelt network system consists of about 200 offices around the world. Chris, welcome.
Thanks, KG. Appreciate that. Great intro. And one quick thing I want to add to the agenda too is we are going to end hopefully with some time left for Q&A. We do want this to be interactive, and if you're as technology savvy as me, which I'm not, but you probably know in Zoom that there's a little Q&A button down at the bottom. If you submit some questions either as we go or at the end during Q&A, we will do our best to answer those for you today, time allowing. So with that being said, as managing partner, I've been part of doing deals here in the Minneapolis market for 20 years, and then several years before that with a family office out of Indiana, doing M&A work. I love it. It's a lot of fun. It's especially fun working with small and mid-sized businesses that have built something from nothing and maybe grown it over a couple of decades and are working on their next chapter. We're going to talk about next chapter a lot today, but real brief background on Sunbelt. We have a local office. I'm in Minneapolis, as is KG, but Sunbelt's been around since 1978. Started in Charleston, South Carolina, therefore the Sunbelt name, and has become the world's largest seller of companies. We handle both what we call Main Street and lower middle market or M&A transactions. And KG, actually, if you give me the next slide, I'll touch on that real quick. If you've ever wondered where your business ranks in the ecosystem of business size, this slide might be of interest to you. As you can see from this, 93% of companies at any given time are below 5 million in revenue. Only just shy of 7% break that $5 million mark up to 100 million. And less than 1% hit 100 million or above. Here's why that's relevant. One, most business owners have no idea that if they break 5 million in revenue, that that's pretty rare achievement. And there's a lot of barriers to getting there. It's also relevant that the things we're going to talk about today, our target market, are these Main Street under 5 million and lower middle market 5 to 100 million revenue companies. Right? If you happen to be a business owner on the line today that's doing over 100 million in revenue, we certainly can connect you with folks who handle those type of transactions. And we have done transactions over that level, but we really specialize in these two segments. Generally private companies selling to other private companies, occasionally selling to public companies. occasionally selling to international buyers, but typically this is going to be the size of transaction we're referring to today. Okay. KG, if you can give me the next slide. So KG referenced this earlier. You know, there is this mistake that business owners make when either go to these type of webinars or seminars, or they talk to their advisors about the idea of selling, and they focus on price. And really, it is all about what you net. So we use the 3-arch system of price, terms, and taxes to look at these deals. And it is really kind of shocking how often business owners might enter even a letter of intent without truly understanding this. So we're going to talk about this today. We're not going to get into exciting tax code, although I will make the comment that capital gains are probably going up. But you need to understand all of these in your deal from the beginning when you're doing planning, even if you're a few years out, to when you receive your offers, analyzing what your price and your terms mean. And terms might be something like what's included in your price, right? Are you retaining all the cash? Are you keeping the net working capital like AR and AP, or is the buyer saying they're going to get that? And then of course, taxes and any debts you have to pay off. How do those things all combine together to your total liquidity event, so you understand what you're going to net out of your life's work? So this will be a theme throughout what we talk about today.
This page, the concept of this page is the following. It's the different circles of value around your company. So if your company is the center of the target, the closer a buyer is to you, the less value they see. And what I mean by that, they're in the same geography. They have very similar or close to similar customers. They're in the same market. They understand it. They don't want to get into it. They're already in it. And they have similar or better or worse technology than you do. Those type of competitors usually see the less value in your company. Therefore, they pay less. And so the further away a buyer is from your industry, your capabilities, the types of customers, the markets you serve, they generally tend to pay more for something that they don't own or something that they don't really understand. And we're giving an example of these different types of buyers and how much value each of them typically see. So again, the closer they are to you, the less value they see. They tend to pay less. And the further away from you, geography, customers, technology, your capabilities, the more they're willing to pay because they see the more value in your company. Next few pages, we're going to talk about the recent closed M&A transactions that we've done in the market, but I'd like to give you 2 examples of what we have discussed on the previous slide. So here, this is a strategic acquisition. So Emerhard acquired Material Distributors this past December 2020, so less than 6 months ago we did this transaction. And the reason Emerhard acquired MDI is because of their geographic positioning and the access to new customers and the ability to cross-sell to different, very similar products, but again, to different customers. And that was the reason they were willing, they were seeing the most value, and they were willing to pay top dollar to be able to acquire this asset in the region that was highly synergistic to theirs because they did not have presence in that location in the Midwest. Second example of that would be the acquisition of Solheim Investment Partners acquired Diversified Distributors. And the reason for that is because they were interested in the industry. They had contacts in the industry that they could see this business grow. And ultimately, the business was de-risked enough for a private equity group to be interested in acquiring as a platform and building on top of it different add-on acquisitions, hopefully somewhere down the line. But 2 different examples of 2 different types of buyers, really. who are very, very active in the marketplace.
And I'll just add to that, that chances are, if you're a business owner, you are getting approached weekly right now, especially from private equity groups or brokers or M&A advisors like us. But private equity groups can be great because they are really well capitalized. They generally have already raised the money. They may not be dependent on bringing in a bank. They've already got the capital in their accounts or existing banking relationships. They have made the decision to buy typically in a certain industry, or they already have a platform and they're looking to bolt on companies like yours, or like the example that KG provided. The challenge is they are professional buyers. So they tend to have sharper pencils, and they can be very demanding, and not as forgiving as a strategic buyer might be, who is making really a company changing acquisition. They want to add you to the family, and your company might bring capabilities they just don't have, that they've tried to build on their own organically and maybe failed at, or they just don't have the people to execute that organic growth. So they tend to be more visionary in what they're buying, long-term thinkers. Private equity groups often are going to aggregate a bunch of companies like yours, hold it for 5 to 7 years, and then sell it to another larger private equity group. So they're a little more exacting in what they want. And for every 100 deals they look at, the stat I've heard is they buy somewhere between 1 and 4. So you might be one in a long list of companies they're looking at. That doesn't tend to be the case with strategics. So just a little peek behind the curtain for you and how private equity groups work.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
This next page really describes the way we're reaching out when executing a marketing campaign for a client of ours. And just think about how hard you as a business owner, how hard you're to reach. So our job is to reach out to a predetermined target list that the business owner approves. But then we can't tell them who you are, so it's confidential. We have to be on purpose vague so they don't understand who the company for sale is. And then we need to sell them this secret. We need to make them interested enough for them to execute on an NDA to provide some information of why they're interested in a certain company. And are they, first of all, willing, and are they able to actually consummate on a transaction? Because you might have all the interest that you want, but if you're not willing to spend the money or you don't have them, well, we usually are not interested in those type of buyers for the specific engagements that we're executing. So this page, we like it to keep it at the minimum, at the 1 page, describe the revenue, what the company does, but again, in very vague terms. And then why, somebody should look at it, a strategic or a private equity group, and how to contact us. And then, we usually take it from there. So this helps us to get to a yes or a no pretty fast. But the question is how efficient we are at contacting all of these different types of buyers.
Yeah, and just kind of going back to the comments we made earlier about how active the market is with buyers, especially private equity groups. Whether you're going to use a firm like ours when you're ready to exit, or try to do it on your own, or another firm, one of the big mistakes to avoid is it can be very flattering if a well-known private equity group or strategic buyer approaches you and says, "Hey, we're looking to grow. We'd like to talk to you about your company." That's what I used to do for a living prior to Sunbelt. I've been at Sunbelt 20 years before that. We were a family office and we were well capitalized, and we would approach folks about acquiring them. The problem is, in that case, when I was doing that, the best possible thing that could happen was I was able to talk to that business owner one-on-one, and they weren't out in the marketplace. And often what buyers like that want, and there's nothing, of ill intent about it, but they're going to say, "Hey, send over the numbers. Let's take a look at what your company makes." That is one of the worst places to start with the buyer. You need to tell them your story. They need to understand not just the quantity of your earnings, but the quality of your company and why the future is bright. If you find yourself in a place where you've been approached by a buyer and you've signed a non-disclosure, they've signed a non-disclosure agreement, that's all great. But once you hand over the financials, if it doesn't have a narrative attached to it, you have lost your opportunity to tell your company's story. You're basically handing over your financials, and now their company's CFO or M&A person is going to dig into those. And yeah, they'll get to know your company, but you've lost a chance to say why those earnings could be double, or how great your leadership team is, or how diverse your customer base is. You don't get a chance to tell the qualitative part of your story. So yes, you will have to hand over financials, but do it in stages and take a chance to tell them why the company is special and why it's strong.
Thank you for this insight, Chris. And this remind me of this past Friday, we closed a transaction with a private equity group. And the story behind this is, our client is a manufacturer of infrastructure products. And they've received an unsolicited offer a year or so ago from a buyer. They were smart enough to contact us. We did the analysis. We provided, not only the financial analysis, but what to point out and the value drivers that are present in the business and everything. We crafted the story. So they've engaged us to run the process, to contact strategics, to contact private equity buyers, to contact buyers in the market. So we brought them multiple offers, 3 offers, but the buyer ended up being the original buyer that first contacted them. But what's the conclusion of the story? We were able to bring them millions of dollars more than they would have ended up selling to that buyer if they would not be testing the market and really running the confidential process of drafting and telling your story and involving multiple parties, so they can they know that when there's competition, usually that drives up the value and the price.
Yeah, well said. You'll notice there is something that is not on this teaser. There is no price. And most of the transactions that are companies between 5 and 100 million in revenue, we consider those to be ideal for strategic and private equity groups. You don't want to put a price on, because that's the way you're going to find out in the process is you're going to talk to a good number of qualified, motivated, well-financed buyers that are looking to buy. They have the money to do it, but they're all going to have slightly different ideas of value. And that's really the only way, by comparing those, that you can make sure you're not leaving money on the table. And why one common saying for us is one buyer is no buyer, because you really haven't compared it to anything what another buyer might pay. Now, if you happen to be a smaller business that's on the line under 5 million in revenue, or even under a couple million in revenue, we sell plenty of those. Those typically do go out without a price, and some of these strategies are similar. But if you're over that 5 million mark up to 100 million, the process of going without a price is almost always the way to go, to make sure that you maximize the return on your life's work. Okay, this is a fun one. Okay, so everybody that comes in here wants to know what their company's worth. We meet with clients. We have several meetings going on in Minneapolis right now, all kinds of different industries that are meeting with brokers and M&A advisors, and their burning question is, what is my company worth? That's what they want to know. So it varies a lot by industry. As you can see in this table, you can see the different major industries across the top: manufacturing, construction, consumer goods, etc. And you can see a fair amount of variation by industry. As we alluded to, risk and growth factors, certain risk, more risk in some industries than there are in others. And that's part of that. Some industries are considered more attractive than others. That's also part of that. But one of the things that is indisputable beyond that is, as your earnings go up, and we're using EBITDA to represent earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. As EBITDA or your profits go up on a pre-tax basis, there is a definite premium you can expect from the marketplace. So most of those companies we've been referencing under 5 million in revenue are going to be these type here in the first line, where you see under 1 million EBITDA, and they're selling, we'll use manufacturing just so we can focus in on something. Manufacturing companies, probably a lot of these are contract manufacturers versus product manufacturers, are selling for a 4x. Look what happens when you get past $1 million in earnings. The multiples of earnings go up to 6. So let's say you're a company doing 500,000 in EBITDA. You're up in that first tier, and you're a contract manufacturer. You might see multiples of 3, 4, maybe even 5, but you're going to see an average of 4 for a typical manufacturer that size. But now, once you get past the $1 million mark, up to 4.9 million in EBITDA, we see a 50% increase in the average multiple. And that continues in each of these levels. And look what happens when you get into the upper stratosphere there, where you're seeing a 10x. Okay. Here's why else this is important. What happens as your company gets bigger, of course, is you solve problems. You make the business bigger than yourself. You hire management. You might even start bringing directors or vice presidents or people who lead your divisions. That takes risk out of your business, because now you are not as important to the business as you once used to be, and that's a good thing. In fact, if you can go on vacation and the business runs without you having to take a phone call every 15 minutes, that's a good thing. If your employees forget your name, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because you built a business that can run without you being there all the time, and that takes risk out of it. And that's what happens as these companies get bigger. They're grabbing more market share, they're getting more professional, they're diversifying, less owner-centric, and that's one of the reasons these multiples get quite a bit higher. Okay. You want to start with this one, KG, or you want me to?
Well, I think you can start with the cons and see where it leads us.
Sure. Great. Happy to do it. So here's another way to illustrate the idea of risk and how it can impact your price. You have that, like the example we just gave. If the business is owner-centric, if you haven't grown it enough where you can afford management team, then that's a risk. Because if you sell the business and you're going to leave and go retire, let's say, well, the buyer doesn't have you. But if you look over in that box to the right where it says management and financials, if you put a management team in place and financial systems in place and controls in place that replace you just being there all the time, being vigilant, right? Actual systems that do that, and operations manuals and processes and technology, that takes risk out for a new owner. Same thing with if you've differentiated yourself from competition, or you diversified your suppliers, or maybe you only serve one industry right now or end market. You haven't diversified that industry yet. Maybe that industry was impacted by COVID, right? Some of you may have experienced that. We're working with a food manufacturer right now who is serving both grocery and the restaurant industry during COVID. Their grocery segment did fantastic. The restaurant segment, not so much, right? Now imagine if they'd just been in restaurants. They'd probably be out of business right now, or darn close to it. They certainly wouldn't be sellable, but they've navigated that. They were diversified enough, and we have them under a letter of intent. Along the same lines, customer diversification. Walmart's your biggest customer. That can be a blessing and a curse. But do you have can you diversify? Can you get some other growth in? Can you expand your distributors or means to market to diversify that risk so it doesn't push down your price? These are just some of the categories. There are many, many more categories out there that buyers evaluate. What I miss, KD?
Well, I think the way to eliminate some of those value deterrents and increase the value and de-risk the business the best way you can is by understanding what those value drivers are and working on eliminating them. And you can easily do that. Well, not easily, but you can do that by hiring a CPA, a Certified Exit Planning Advisor. We can recommend some. These are the type of advisors that specialize in preparing companies for a future exit. they're part of the team of your exit planning team, and they help you realize work on the realizing of the potential of the value drivers that are existent in the business, and work on the areas that need improvement.
Yeah. What I'll say about this too, as a business owner myself, and having worked with, and both formally and casually, with friends and also with clients, talk to people about this concept. We as business owners are so busy working in our business sometimes that it's hard to work on our business. And if that's you, and if that's the case, and you like this idea of growing your value, what I'd say to you is it's one of the best investments you'll ever make to hire somebody to help you with it. Because not only will you sell your business for more down the road, and you'll make the business less dependent on you, you will enjoy the business more. Because really a lot of this growth engineering, raising the value of your business, is just making it run better. So even if you were going to live forever and run your business forever, right? It's a good thing to do. It's really just about making your business less risky to you and whoever the future owner is. So if you do it and you change your mind, you're like, hey, I'm going to hang on to another 10 years, having an exit planner or certified exit planner through like Exit Planning Institute, which is one of our other presenters, I think it's a great investment because it'll just be good for you in the business too. Yeah, this is I like the joke around the office. I think for me might be that if I like pictures a lot, so I like simple illustrations. This is about as simple as it gets. As your risk gets higher, as a buyer's risk or your risk gets higher, price comes down. The only real cure to that is growth. So if you have exponential double-digit growth, you can fight against some of that risk because you're growing so fast, you're making up for some of that risk. But at the end of the day, de-risking and highlighting your growth is going to drive your multiple up. It's about qualitative versus quantitative. Many businesses that you can take very similar companies doing $1 million in profit and put them side by side. One might sell for a 4-time multiple, the other might sell for a 6-time multiple. And that's because one has less risk and more growth opportunity than the other. And your ability as a business owner to illustrate that to a buyer is critical. So you start thinking like a buyer too, and recognizing risk as they might see it can be very helpful. One of the things we're going to send out following this presentation is this slide. You probably can't quite make it out in this slide, but we're going to send a high-res version to you. This is another way for you to look at business value. We encourage you to answer the questions of these value drivers that are about customers, competition, capacity, and competence. So as an example, in that first column of customers, you would be ranked high on this value driver and ranked low on risk if you had a national customer base, if no customer exceeds 5% of your revenue, if you have a team who wins and retains your business versus it's all you as an owner or ownership group that's winning the business, and or you have a recurring revenue model, okay? Now, not all those things might not be true, but if most of them are true, you would circle the high box there for customers. But if you were low, let's jump to the extreme, you might have small local customers. You might have large customer concentrations, or you might handle as owner most of the customers, or at least winning those customers. Maybe that task falls to you, or you have a large project-based revenue. So you can see the difference in the quality of those revenue streams. And if you really think about it, a lot of that is really about what is the likelihood that that revenue is going to continue and grow in the future? How likely is it that's sustainable? Well, if you're doing mostly project-based revenue versus recurring revenue, then you're bidding for your work all the time. And we sell plenty of companies like that. But it may mean that you get a little lower multiple versus if you have a subscription revenue model that's a little more predictable. That's just one example. You'll get this in an email following the presentation. I would encourage you to rank yourself out and look for that risk and some things you might want to attack.
Next, we'll talk about the potential processes of selling a company, what the possibilities are. And there's definitely different scenarios, but our most likely our clients have been contacted or solicited numerous times by either strategic buyers or advisors on the buy side or private equity groups and so on. So coming back to that story that we told you about the transaction that closed this Friday, um, that was the case, right? So it's the left side of this page. It's specialized negotiations with one party. It's very common. It's deemed or perceived to be less time consuming, but not necessarily, because still the process needs to be followed. The due diligence needs to be performed by the buyer if they're serious and they know what they're doing. The if there's financing or lenders involved, they follow the same process. So it's not necessarily a very much shorter process than a full-fledged marketing campaign. Again, it's deemed easier, but it's not. It's really not. And the most important aspect of this is that it leaves money on the table. And then as you move to the right side of this page, there's a highly targeted process. So you might be, I don't know, is it 20? Is it 30? It really depends, because some companies have a certain amount of buyers that will only be able to acquire them. And that can be because of, their ultimately EBITDA size, if they're just too large, and as you move higher in EBITDA size, the number of buyers tend to be less and less, because usually there's more people that have less money than vice versa. So there's a limited pool of buyers. What we recommend usually is a targeted discussion plus broader search. So not starting with the idea that, hey, I know who the buyer is, I'm in the industry, even though we have a variety of industry experts here at Sunbelt. We don't go with the idea that we know who the buyer will be. We're going to contact 10 of them because we know the industry. We go with the open mind, without knowing who. We have an understanding who probably will be, but we don't know for sure. And we design our target lists. They're not static. I mean, as more information gets learned in the marketplace, as things evolve, and they do evolve very fast, we change our target list, we change our approaches, and so on. So it's a living and breathing process that is not static, but it also it makes sure that it covers every aspect of the buyer out there, so you don't leave money on the table, and you're confident that the process that is being executed by us is the best possible solution for you and what you're trying to achieve. And then the broad process, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But we like the combination of two, because we like the preciseness of these targets, but at the same time, we're not we're including some of those more non-obvious or out of the box companies that sometimes may arise. So for example, Google acquired Nest a few years back, and nobody understood why it happened. But now we do understand, because they wanted to get into our houses and build the infrastructure and the ecosystem with all of their products that they've been developing over the past 3 years. And now look at us, it's all voice controlled, it's all camera technology and so on and so forth. That was a true example of a non-obvious out of the box thinkers.
Yeah, and I'll add another interesting example. The commercial printing industry has gone through a lot of disruption as technologies come in and the pivot to digital, and a lot of those companies tried to make that pivot into digital marketing. Just things that weren't being printed were going online, so website design, SEO, things of that sort. But they were having they weren't those type of companies. That's not the talent they had there. So we saw many, not as much now because a lot of those positions have been taken, but early on there, a lot of printers, commercial printers, were buying digital marketing companies from us because they really didn't know how to grow them organically. It wasn't their specialty. So they wanted to add that capability, right? In addition, they knew commercial printing, but they really didn't understand these internet guys, right? And how to build a website. So they'd buy an agency, they'd buy a web design firm, they'd buy an SEO or SEM firm to bolt on that capability to what they did. And I would argue that that's not really obvious, right? A lot of those digital marketing companies we were bringing out to other digital marketing companies, and they didn't want to pay anything for them because they already understood how to do it. Familiarity breeds contempt, right? So if you could find a buyer who knew they wanted the capability but didn't quite know the path how to get there organically, you're solving a problem for them, and that's generally where they're going to pay the best price. So therefore, that's why we generally recommend that targeted plus broader search.
So in the next section of our presentation, it's a case study about a client we had. And it's really about getting to the next chapter, right? We talked about numbers and concepts and value drivers and more tangible things. In this next section, we would like to talk about more intangible things, such as, feelings. What are you gonna do in the next chapter if you decide that you want to exit the company? Well, what are some of the things you're gonna be busy with? Because a lot of our clients, they've been busy with growing their companies and making them perform. But what if that, no longer is what gets you up every single day in the morning? What motivates you? What's the next chapter that's gonna be interesting? So for me, for example, that's a picture of a recent trip that I took with my wife. In June, this is Glacier National Park. It's early morning, it's perfect weather, mountains, and it's beautiful. That's the type of places that I right now think that my wife and I are gonna, visit once we retire. I don't know, but that's just something that I wanna think about and how much I enjoy this view. So do yourself a favor and think about how does your next chapter in life look like? What is it? Think about it. And if you don't have a plan, you might not be ready to transition from the business. Most of our clients have post-business ownership goals like charity, writing memoirs, pursuing different hobbies, or just retiring somewhere warm and laying down on the beach and just enjoying life because that's what they want to do. Again, if you don't have a plan, it's really important for you to start thinking about one and what you will do. Chris, do you want to add something to this?
Yeah, I would say probably not all. We do have some clients who are going to, we just had a client who sold and he's going into racing full time, which isn't typical for us, younger. But most are have been in the business 20 plus years. They're looking at retirement. Maybe they're just burnt out. They've done it long enough. And if you kind of back up and think about it, like, hey, if you've gone through the first few tough years of running a business, you've gotten into a place where it's successful and you're growing at a decent pace and you're comfortable, like it kind of sounds nuts to sell your business. Like, why would you do that? And of course, the folks that we're typically helping they've reached that stage where like, look, I've made enough money. I do need this liquidity event to fund my next chapter, but I want to spend more time with the grandkids. I want to retire. I want to travel. I want to go after that next chapter. But to KG's point, we do ask in many of our meetings, like, what is the next chapter for you? And if they don't have an answer, then they may not be ready, right? They may not be ready to exit because a business can be a big part of your identity. when people ask what you do, I'm a business owner. I own a manufacturing business, I own a distribution business, whatever it is. That's why we encourage you to explore that, especially if you have other decision makers, whether it's kids in the business or spouse or other family, and just make sure everybody's on the same page so you don't have an uncomfortable Thanksgiving if everybody was thinking something else than what you're about to do. And from a case study standpoint, we're going to call him Jeff to protect confidentiality. But we make a lot of suggestions like this. We do a lot of education like this. And this owner owned a building products company, and we spent some time. We provided a complimentary value range, and spent some time talking to him about value. His spouse really wanted him to get down to Florida more, spend longer times in Florida. They were going on for a couple of weeks. They had a place down there. She was thinking more like months, and the grandkids were down there. And I think he was 60.
Yeah.
AJ, around there.
Yeah.
And we gave him some advice on how to de-risk. We looked at some of the risk factors, helped him and helped explain the concept to him. And he recognized that risk in his business. And you know what? He actually did something about it. Very disciplined guy. He went after that stuff, diversified the customers, diversified the suppliers some. And then we brought him to market a couple of years later. And I would guess he raised the business value by a couple $1 million during that time, KG.
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah. But what it started with was him saying, okay, you guys tell me what it's worth. And as we mentioned during the presentation, we do that complimentary for business owners, not buyers, but people who own businesses today who are thinking about an exit in the next couple of years. We will gladly sit down and give you our thoughts on that, because we want you to have a foundational number. Plus, it's kind of our chance to show off a little bit that we know some things. So you're thinking about us when you want to exit, but it gives you a foundational number to say, is this enough money for my next chapter? And if I've got a couple more years before I want to go, can I go fix some of this stuff before I go to market, right? Can I take some of this risk out? Can I do some diversification? Can I be gone on Fridays so that the employees are getting used to me not being around all the time and having to, have me solve all the problems, or bring in another manager or add another department that makes the business less dependent on me. And he did that. And I would encourage all of you to go through a similar process, even if you're 2-3 years out, because again, it would just make the business run better. KG, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think the scope of the engagement was really to maximize the proceeds, but besides that, the intangible part about it is really our client wanted to retire. He wanted to spend more time with his wife. They own a home and a boat in southern state in Florida. He wanted to spend as much as time possible with his grandkids, because he didn't get to spend much time with his kids while they were growing. So that was the culmination. That's the great part about what we're doing and where our process is usually with what they end up.
We wanted to keep it very quiet, right? Because as a distributor, everybody knew everybody, and that was one of his biggest concerns. And we were able to keep it. It's not easy to keep these kind of projects confidential, but because we use a target list, we're careful about who we talk to. The employees didn't know until it was, outside of a couple of key managers, didn't know about the sale until it was announced. So there wasn't an opportunity for everybody to get nervous and start putting out their resumes, right? And I just want to, I think we've got enough time for me to make this comment, but I want to add that if you go back to that process slide, you don't have to go back there, KG, but if you think about that process slide, okay, thank you. It is very common that people are approached by a buyer, or they're having, one-on-one negotiation. They have one buyer and they stop there. It's what we call an incumbent buyer. One of the reasons that happens is it's scary to go to market, because confidentiality, fear of the unknown, who are these buyers I'm going to meet. But I just want to emphasize that it is the only way to know if there's a better buyer out there on fit or in dollars. You're just limiting, you're controlling it more, but what you're really doing is limiting yourself, just like you would if your business only sold to one customer, right? You'd be insane to have one customer. Why would you have one buyer for your company you talk to, and limit yourself to that option. Unless you're just so highly specialized, there's only one buyer in the country that understands what you do, which is doubtful. So it gives you more options. And in that case, I think the case study we're talking about, building products distributor, we had 3 offers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the highest offer was probably $1 million better, $2 million better than the next one, somewhere around at least 7 figures better, right? Same financials, same business, looking at the same time, but that it was a superior offer.
This really just describes the process we're using to maximize the value, and usually the process is 6 to 12 months long. It really depends on how receptive some of these buyers are, because again, imagine how busy you are, and I know how busy Chris is, and that's how I actually understand what's happening with business owners, because I'm trying to reach out to him and I have to text him multiple times and just to be able to get some answer. But when he replies, he gives you that attention. So that's what we're striving for, right? If it's something that is of interest, and the way we position all of these projects is that it's a must see for these hopefully buyers. So we start with somewhat a lot of them. Let's say that it's a target of 200 companies, and then we started kind of qualifying them and making sure we're targeting the right ones. Then out of those 100 that we've contacted, we spoke with, and they're interested, and there's a reason why they're interested, and then they have the available capital to actually execute the transaction, only then they receive some information on your company. And even at that point, we don't share confidential information, the secret sauces, the employees or the customers or anything of that information. None of that is shared. And that's how we control the process. As the buyer gets more interested in what's out there, we tend to, give them a little bit more and a little bit more, so they can, absorb it and make that decision of theirs. But it's always a balancing act about not giving out too much information and not too little, because we want them to make an educated decision, as much of an educated decision as possible, and to assess the value of the company as accurately as they can in their own eyes. And then Chris, you want to talk about what happens after they receive the book?
Yeah, just first echoing what KG said, if you go all the way back to the teaser we showed you earlier, that's the selling a secret part of this. It's going out to those 200 targets you see at the top of this funnel, right? And then the calls, and then the text messages, and the stalking starts, because we're trying to get a hold of a busy CEO, a business owner like you, but the company might be 5 times that size. They're generally a little bigger, or they might be a high net worth individual. Private equity groups aren't as hard, but certainly the strategics who tend to pay the most, they're hard to get in front of the decision makers, right? And you need to tease them with some information that gets their attention. As KG said, once we get down to the ones who have signed a confidentiality agreement, they've received your story, your confidential information memorandum, then we're looking for an indication of interest. And you may not be familiar with that term. Some folks are, but a lot of business owners aren't. You might be familiar with the letter of intent, which is the actual offer. The indication of interest, probably the best way for me to explain it is, are you even in the range? Should we bother talking to you more? That'd probably be the non-Minnesota nice way of saying that, right? Give us some indication that you're interested in writing. It's not a formal offer. It's a page or two. Tell us why you're interested, what price range you're thinking, and a little bit about yourself. There's probably been a conversation with ownership, but probably not a site visit at that time. They've seen some preliminary information, but not done a deep dive on due diligence. And we're trying to find out if they're worth spending more time on. In this is a different case study now than the one we were talking about earlier. You can see we had 10 indications of interest. And then we invited, of those 10, we invited the top ones to submit letters of intent. And you can see that that number dropped to 5. Now, of course, the other 5, I'm sure we said something like, hey, we appreciate it. You're off on the range. You know, we have offers that are substantially better or a better fit. If you'd like to submit a new indication of interest, we'd be happy to talk to you more. So that's a very diplomatic way of saying your price is too low or your terms aren't attractive, so probably doesn't make sense for us to talk more. And if you really think about what that does for you as an owner who's selling, is it gives you 2 chances to negotiate, right? You get to reply to the IOI and say, yeah, it's in the range. There's a few things we like about it, a few things we don't like about it. Maybe you can address that in your letter of intent. So they're essentially giving you 2 offers before you actually have to formally reply. You get the IOI, and then you invite them to submit the indication of interest, and then you invite them to submit the letter of intent. That's really, you get to negotiate twice before you actually have to reply. In this case, look how drastically different those letters of intent are in this case. The gray bar represents their initial offers. The additional bronze or brown you see there is what we call the auction premium, where we invited them back and said, hey, is this your final and best, which is really a 3rd chance to negotiate. You know, we reviewed your letter of intent. Here's some additional questions or concerns we have. We'll be making recommendations to our client. So we want to make sure we have your final and best offer in front of us so they can make an informed decision. So now you've had a chance to, you know, really create an auction type environment for your business. Now, the question for you would be, if you have an incumbent buyer right now, how would you feel if, you know, $25 million in this case is a very nice price, actually. This owner probably would have taken it. But if that was your incumbent buyer and you found out later that you accepted offer 3 for 25 million, and there was an offer number 5 out in the universe there somewhere that you didn't explore, you might have just left $15 million on the table. And that's really the value of a process in talking to multiple buyers. It is work. You can see that took 8 months from us being engaged to the end, but it certainly paid for itself and was very informative to our client on what their business was actually worth in the marketplace and how they maximized their return on this business they'd been working on for decades. Anything else on that one, KG?
No, I think that was a great summary. Thank you, Chris. And you know, I realize that we have 5 minutes left.
Okay.
So we'll share our contact information. But are there any, you know, questions that the audience has? Would like to respond to them if we can right now, and if not, send me your questions at, you know, this email address, and I can share it in the group too. 1 second.
Yeah, and as a reminder, in the few minutes we have left, and we can go a couple minutes over if we do get questions, but there is a Q&A button that you should be able to use down at the bottom of your screen if you hover over your screen, where you can submit a question to us. If you prefer to use the chat, you can certainly do that too. I think the Q&As only show up to myself and to KG. So if you want to ask it confidentially, or certainly if you want to email us after with confidential questions, we can do that. So typically what we recommend at this point is if you are, you know, 2-3 years out, even if you're further out, it probably makes sense for you to find out what your business is worth and get a complimentary value range, and have a basis for value. See if that number surprises you, either high or low, and use it as a basis for considering some exit plan. And I'm not seeing one thing in chat. I'm not seeing anything in Q&A. So I think we'll just leave it as we'll send out the presentation, KG.
Yeah.
And we'll send out the value driver page as well. If any of you want to do a self-assessment, if you're not quite ready to talk to us, but you want to look at your value drivers, we'll send out that document as well, so that you have a way to look at your own business value and possibly de-risk it. Yeah.
And in terms of next steps, you know, you can discover what your business is worth now. You know, at this point in time, it's good to know how much your business worth, just to understand if there's any gap in terms of how much you need and how much you have, Next week, we're gonna learning about how to preserve and or grow the sale proceeds from the sale of your business, and that's the presentation hosted by our colleagues from Northwestern Mutual. And the takeaway is, $5,000 value, no cost, no obligation to you. If you're interested in how much, about the value range of your business, please contact me, and we'll explore the options. And as parting thoughts, Chris, do you wanna start with that?
Yeah, parting thoughts. Think about the next chapter, right? You're probably only going to sell your business once. It's a bit of an adventure doing it. It's a big undertaking. It's you want to do it right. It's a culmination of what's probably a lot of your life that you put in your business. You probably have friends and colleagues in that business, and it just pays to get educated, to find out if you should go through a process or you should work for an exit planner like our friends at the Exit Planning Institute. But thinking about that next chapter and how you're going to execute this really important step in your life, it's one of the things we're here to help with. So we often talk to business owners over the course of years, as we referenced in our case study, before they're ready. That's okay. We're used to that. It's a big personal and financial decision. So we're here to do planning with you. So when you're ready, you can be educated.
Yeah. So get a complimentary value range, de-risk the business, work on the risk that you discover, do yourself a favor, run a professionally organized process. Don't leave money on the table. This is not the time for good enough. Do it once, do it well. We've done it thousands of times. You'll do it just once. Maximize the return on your life's work and enjoy the next chapter of your life, whatever you want it to be.
Well said.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Please join us again next week, same time, 12 p.m. Central, 1 p.m. Eastern, for our presentation on how to conserve and grow your net proceeds from the sale. And it's going to be hosted by Northwestern Mutual. Thank you very much for attending. Have a good day.